I'm A.J.Shorter, and for those of you that haven't asked already, yes, I am Dan Shorter's nephew. He was my father's youngest brother, and as a result, I've been in and out of Alva all my life. I've never lived here, but I've seen the town grow, blossom. It's an amazing little town, and it's because of people like you that have a commitment to success that it does have that success. I'm the community outreach coordinator for the Northwest office of the Alzheimer's Association. We originally had offices in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. We've opened a Northwest office. I'm based out of Enid. We have a Southwest office based out of Lawton and a Southeast office based out of Ada. Unfortunately, we're growing, and we're growing because of the growing need for information and support and research for Alzheimer's issues. Point of order, when you're done with me, just give me one of these, because like Uncle Dan, I'll talk forever. Our efforts mainly, we're the largest, we used to call them nonprofits, but now we're called a voluntary health organization. We're the largest in the world. We generate hundreds of millions of dollars every year for Alzheimer's research, because like every disease, whether it be cancer, Parkinson's, the only way to beat it is through research, and about 70% of what we raise goes directly to research. We fund a number of studies ourselves. Some little bit of that goes to support the organization's infrastructure, myself included, and then the balance of it goes to advocacy. We have to be very proud of our representative, Mr. Tom Cole. He has a great commitment to the cause of Alzheimer's, having lost his father to this insidious disease. This year, through the actions of Tom Cole and his leadership, there have been the National Institute of Health budget got an influx of $358 million for Alzheimer's research. Sounds like a lot of money. Another $150 million for the 30% of dementias that we suffer from that are not Alzheimer's. Why is this money well spent? We have a few Medicare recipients in this room. The Medicare recipient who has Alzheimer's disease uses 6 times more dollars in health care through Medicare than does the same age person that does not struggle with Alzheimer's disease. Some people that are less fortunate are on Medicaid or Sooner Care, which is the state-run part of Medicare. The average Medicaid recipient with Alzheimer's disease is 14 times more expensive than the non-Alzheimer's equivalent. So as you can see from those numbers alone, Medicare, Medicaid, this is a great burden now. And as Alzheimer's has increased about 70% in the last 10 years in Oklahoma alone, you can see that Representative Cole's investment is a good investment from a strict dollar point of view. Alzheimer's is expensive. It is Alzheimer's is the only disease of the top 10 killers that has no preventative measures. Now, that's not quite true. Good health, healthy body, healthy mind. The number one risk for Alzheimer's is age. So we all get a day closer to that risk factor. The number 2 factor is general health. Cardiac health is the single best thing you can do to help prevent Alzheimer's and other dementias. So we're real big on that type of education, not my particular strength, but still that's the important thing. Of the top 10 killers, Alzheimer's is the only one whose incident of death has increased in the last 5 years. Cancer deaths have gone down. Cardiovascular deaths have gone down. Alzheimer's deaths have increased by about 17%. The the funding for Alzheimer's is absolutely critical in order to turn those numbers around. Alzheimer's is the point I missed. Alzheimer's is the only one of top 10 killers in America that cannot be prevented, cannot be slowed down once it's in place, and is always fatal. People don't think of Alzheimer's. They think of Alzheimer's as a mental condition that you suffer with whatever the balance of your life is. That is often true. Many people die with Alzheimer's. But people that die from Alzheimer's, Alzheimer's is the 6th cause of death in America. 6th. What happens with Alzheimer's is it is a disease of the brain. Alzheimer's, the two main indicators are Alzheimer's creates what are called plaques, just like we have plaques in our cardiovascular system that causes high blood pressure. We have Alzheimer's sufferers actually have plaques in their brains, and just like the plaques in our veins, they clog things up. And unfortunately, when they clog things up in your brain starts to lose its function and capacity. Eventually, the plaques are so great that you lose the ability to keep your body alive through the autonomic nervous system. Your brain is so burdened by this that it can no longer tell you to breathe. And pneumonia is the #1 reason people die directly from Alzheimer's, is because their respiratory becomes so compromised by the disease, and as a result, they're very prone to pneumonia. Plaques are one thing, tangles are another. Tangles are, the research is intensive, and it looks like the plaques and tangles both are what they call misfolded proteins. Your body processes proteins, and that's how we stay alive. And as those proteins get mishandled in the brain, that's what creates these plaques and tangles. Plaques are always present in autopsy, which unfortunately is the only way to 100% diagnose Alzheimer's, is post-mortem. But everybody that has plaques does not have Alzheimer's. So we have a confusing bit of research there. I've had a couple of questions about, well, I have a little memory loss, I can't remember names, I can't remember where I put my keys. These are not indicators of Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's almost always starts with memory issues, almost always without fail. It will lead to cognitive, executive function, and things like that, but it almost always starts with memory issues. And the benchmark we use is when your memory issues sufficiently interfere with your daily living that you can't do what you used to do. That is where we start to be really worried about the possibility of Alzheimer's. To give you an idea of what the Alzheimer's population is, there are people that are diagnosed with Alzheimer's in their mid-30s. Not many, 1 or 2%. Age is the #1 factor, and 90% of Alzheimer's occurs in people age 65 and over. But 10% occur what is called early onset or younger onset. Many people are diagnosed in their early 60s. Alzheimer's has a path of from 2 to 20 years. We have a gentleman called Ron Grant, who, if you look him up on YouTube and in the internet, he's a very elegant speaker for Alzheimer's. He was diagnosed 8 years ago, and he is still very functional. He needs a lot of support, but if he were here presenting, you'd be much more impressed with him than you might be with me, because he is a sufferer, a struggler, and yet he is a great public speaker and can really bring it home and tell you what it is to struggle with Alzheimer's from a personal point of view. I'm sure everybody in this room knows somebody that's been touched by Alzheimer's. My cousin, Uncle Dan's niece, from his oldest sister, died of Alzheimer's. She did not die with Alzheimer's. She died from Alzheimer's. My mother, boy, I'm having trouble today. My wife's uncle, who was a math instructor down at Duncan, brilliant man, died with Alzheimer's. My mother-in-law suffers from Alzheimer's now. Very difficult process. We have in your materials everything, with the exception of these, has our 800 number on it. And that's where we recommend that people start if they have questions, if they have concerns. Our 800 number is staffed 24/7 by master's level social workers, experts in Alzheimer's. No matter what the question is, how do I spell it? Where do I put that apostrophe? These people will answer that for you. Literally, I'm sitting here with a gun and one of us is going to get some relief today. 800 number, they can go all the way to that level of crisis intervention. Everybody I've talked to, and I've referred a number of people to this 800 number, everybody comes back just amazed, because these people, all they do is Alzheimer's. They're not telling somebody how to fix their cell phone on this call and doing Alzheimer's on this call. So that's very important. If I could, let's just run through the materials I've given you. The Oklahoma chapter, well, that's self-promotion, and who cares? We have the basics of Alzheimer's, help with some general understanding. Very good booklet. I talked about, we do a program, and I do a program, which I'd be glad to bring to Alva anytime for any group, but we have an hour-long program that is complete with PowerPoint, the whole bit, and it's called Know the 10 Signs, Early Detection Matters. So I've got a little bookmark in there. You can see some of those 10 signs. I had a young lady in my office 2 weeks ago that was just in tears, and she said, if I'd had that bookmark 5 years ago, we could have been making plans. Because her husband has become unable to work because he can no longer bring the executive function necessary to do his job. So that's important. This is the 800 number again. Can't stress this enough. Great support, anybody at any level of need. The last two pieces, this is my personal commitment, is the piece that says 10 tips when talking with someone struggling with Alzheimer's disease. We all have, and this is true of any dementias. It's also true of just people struggling in general. Things like, very simple things. Always identify yourself. Always get indirect eye contact. People with Alzheimer's lose their peripheral vision, and if you come up from behind and touch them on the shoulder, you might scare them to death. So always get in front of them, always make that eye contact, identify yourself. The other major point on here that I'm real big on is how you communicate. The two things that I did with my mother that now that I'm in this business, I go, how could I have been so unkind? Was, well, Mom, you remember. No, Mom doesn't remember. If Mom remembered, this wouldn't be our issue. You go, well, you remember Susan. No, you introduce Susan, and sometimes with my mother-in-law, I come in and go, I'm A.J., Debbie's husband. And so far, she's been able to keep Debbie in her mind. She's lost her daughter in Tulsa, unfortunately. She just doesn't know. When Cindy visits, she knows who Cindy is, but if Cindy's not standing in front of her, that girl that lives over there, that's her connection to Cindy now. So we don't ask any questions that would agitate, make that person uncomfortable, or make that person feel stupid, to use the technical term. It's just unkind. It's not productive. You can't argue people out. My mother-in-law is just quite sure that she drove to that facility yesterday, and she's probably going to leave tomorrow. She's going to check out of that hotel and leave tomorrow. Can't talk her out of it. Can't say, no, Mom, you've been here for 5 years. You got rid of your car voluntarily 5 years ago. No, that's not her reality. You have to go into their reality. She says John came to visit. Well, John is her only surviving sibling, and John is 86 years old, 2 years younger than my mother-in-law. John lives in Stillwater, and in fact, John Smith probably created some of the wheat we're growing out here because he was an ag man over there for many years. But Johnny hasn't been out of Stillwater in years. But he came to visit yesterday. Well, did you have a good visit? Go where they are, accept. The two other techniques that we use are direction. When mother-in-law gets onto that, you stole my car, we go, well, look, Mike brought some baby pictures. Now we don't have to have that argument anymore. So you redirect, you substantiate them. When they say Johnny was here, yes, Johnny was here. Good. Give them that freedom to live in their world. When we get into the end of the disease, there are three things we need to remember. When my cousin Laura Lou got to where she didn't even know if I was in the room or not, to my great shame, now that I know better, I quit going. Because I thought, she's in the potted plant phase, they're going to water her once a week, take care of her. She doesn't know I'm here, why bother? And with the Alzheimer's Association, we are quite convinced that that person is always in there. I use the Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer example. He says, when you're going to deal with dogs, you bring in all the positive energy you can to start with. And I'm a firm believer in that. Even with people in the very final stages of Alzheimer's, I'm a firm believer if you bring in that loving, positive energy, it makes a difference in that person's life. It is absolutely critical to maintain those relationships. The story is, they asked the old man, excuse me for the not politically correct, but they asked the old man, said, you go every day to the nursing home and visit your wife, and she hasn't known who you are for 10 years. And of course his response, they said, why do you go? And his response is, I still know who she is. That person is still there, that person still deserves your love and care. So never give up on a person with Alzheimer's, because there's always somebody you love in there. It can be, these people can change over time. One of the things that Ron Grant talks about is, I have to learn to be who I am almost every day. I'm the guy that can't remember my grandchildren's names. That's the guy I am today. Tomorrow, I might not be able to remember my kids' names. And tomorrow, that's the man I'll be tomorrow. So that's, my last thing is, this is just, once again, this page says trial match. I have my trial match shirt on. The only thing that's going to help us defeat, cure, and destroy Alzheimer's disease is research. Trial Match is a program run by the Alzheimer's Association in cooperation with major medical providers and major research conductors all across America. Sign up for Trial Match. You can call the 800 number. You give them your email. If you choose to, you can take their short survey. Then, if your survey matches up with anybody that's doing a clinical trial right now, they will email you. Nobody will call at your house. Nobody will call on your phone. You don't want to talk to them, just delete it. But they will contact you with email, and if you are willing to participate, they'll help you do that. Right now there are 20 clinical trials being done in Oklahoma alone. And those are all the way from, did you eat your carrots today? Okay, mark that box. All the way up to people with the most severe late stages of Alzheimer's looking for drug interventions and other interventions like that. I'm signed up. They need healthy people. They need people that are worried. They need people that have been diagnosed at early, middle, and late. They need people to do research. Fortunately, in Oklahoma, we have 21 that are currently running, but there are another 13 that could be running if we could just find enough people to fill out their roster. Nationally, there are hundreds of research, clinical research programs that simply cannot go forward because not enough people are willing to stand in line and be a part of that study. So, talking to people, read that. That is a great piece of of work that actually comes from partially from the Mayo Clinic. The trial match, take a look at that, please, because research is going to fix this. Research is going to be part of defeating Alzheimer's, and we can't do it without people. 10 signs, if you're concerned, I've talked to a couple of people that said, well, we knew they were slipping, and we knew this, and we knew that, but we really didn't know what it was all about. This will help you perhaps have a better understanding and earlier intervention. There's no prevention. You can't treat it. There are actually 4 drugs that are currently available to treat Alzheimer's. They are effective in about 25% of the population, and it's always fatal. This is a way, early planning. Some of you guys and gals aren't worried about this. People my age, people our age, we should have been planning for being old a long time ago, and some of us didn't. Well, if you're diagnosed with Alzheimer's or other dementia, the time will come when you are no longer able, in the legal term, you no longer have competency to run your affairs. If you know that ahead of time, you start your planning, you get things taken care of, your ducks in a row, as they say, get the house taken care of. When my mother-in-law, my Aunt Oliva, Uncle Dan's oldest sister, when my mother-in-law went into a pile, we had to scramble because we had no idea. The week before she had her event, she was mowing her lawn. But we didn't pay any attention. But if you have been diagnosed, there are family obligations you need to look at. What are you going to do with the house? What are you going to do with the land? What are you going to do with your, in my case, collection of armadillos? So early detection, even though there's not much we can do, but you can make plans. You can improve communication. You can volunteer to help the research. You can call the 800 number for information, research, information, support, grief counseling, crisis counseling, caregiver issues, because about 1/3 of people that are primary caregivers for people struggling with Alzheimer's pass before the person with Alzheimer's, because the caregiving is so stressful. It is one of the best books on caregiving is called The 36-Hour Day. And a 36-hour day just beats you down. If you have some supports, less likely that's going to happen. So that's basically what I came to tell you about today. As I said, I'll come up to Woods County, to Alva. I'll talk to 2 people, 20 people, 2,000 people. I'll talk till you do this. I'll talk for 2 minutes. I'll talk for 2 hours, whatever's appropriate. So, yes, sir.
Dementia, is that an offshoot of Alzheimer's?
Well, Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. Dementia is when you're starting to lose your capacity for proper thought. Alzheimer's is 70% of the dementias diagnosed in America.
And their testing and stuff, is that hereditary?
Hereditary, just like breast cancer or prostate cancer, yes, if you have Alzheimer's in your family, most especially if you have Alzheimer's in your direct family, parents, siblings, you have about that much better chance. It is a factor. It's not a determinant factor by any means. Other dementias are what we used to call hardening of the arteries. It's now called vascular dementia. When, remember the plaques, the highway that delivers goods to your brain get compromised, and your brain no longer has the blood supply to operate correctly, and that's a dementia. There's Lewy body dementias, which is kind of like Alzheimer's, builds up these little plaques, but more in specific areas. We all know Robin Williams, and everybody says, well, he was morbidly depressed and he committed suicide. No, Robin Williams suffered from Lewy body dementia. And unlike Alzheimer's, which is a steady decline, Lewy body's like this. One day you're perfectly cognizant, able to do, and the next day you are just totally unable to do anything. Then there are some other dimensions as well. Yes, sir?
Some of the drugs that you mentioned that help Alzheimer's, they help other forms of dementia also?
I'll be real honest with you. Generally not, because vascular is a completely different kind of dementia. Well, you can't treat one medical condition with a drug for another. So generally not. Some things like, unfortunately, the benzodiazepines, your Xanax and your Ativans and stuff, are sometimes used for calming and agitation, although we found in Alzheimer's it's usually not a very good, not always a good choice. But no, sir, the Lewy body, Parkinson's also has a dementia component, and all the drugs so far that the 4 drugs that we all know, Namenda and Aricept and Exelon, and the 4th one escapes me, but they all treat Alzheimer's directly, but at the best they can slow down the drugs, slow down the progression of the disease and slow it down significantly at about 25%. Ron Grant that I spoke of, he's been on some of these drugs for the 8 years that he's been diagnosed, and it seems to be helping him quite a bit. But right now, there's for the others, we're kind of at a loss. Yes, sir.
So if they're not cerebral vascular improvement medication,
Right.
Alzheimer's, what do they do?
Alzheimer's,
Neurological stimulus.
exactly right. What they do is they break the blood-brain barrier and try to get at least some effective medication. And what it does is they're simply trying to slow the formation of these plaques and slow the tangles that result. The plaques actually attach to the neurons themselves and make them, they just don't work as well. And the tangles affect the actual communication between the neurons. And so they're trying to do interventions that affect those. They're not destroying the plaques, they're not untangling the tangles. They're just trying to slow that process. We haven't found anything to back us up even half a step. We can slow the descent significantly in about 25% of cases. But that's the only thing we have at this point. It is insidious. It is just from the Medicare and Medicaid numbers I gave you, we can see, I come from 10 years of aging services, and we used to call it the silver tsunami, that 10,000 of us boomers are going to turn 65 every day for the next 20 years. And we thought, boy, aging services, well, now that I'm in Alzheimer's association, that's nothing. The Alzheimer's care, if Alzheimer's, right now, we predict that Alzheimer's will be $1 out of every 3 Medicare dollars within the next 15 years. 1/3 of Medicare is going to be strictly for direct medical care of people with Alzheimer's. So, Representative Tom Cole, today Alzheimer's is a $2.3 billion medical problem and another 2.15 in uncompensated care, loss of work, non-medical. So right now right now Alzheimer's disease is a $5 billion impact on America, and that number's not going to go down unless we get sufficient research to find some way to prevent, slow down, or cure Alzheimer's. We've all seen organizations that say, my job is to put myself out of business, but I can tell you for a fact that everybody that works in the Alzheimer's Association wishes they could go to work tomorrow and be told, hey, we're fixed, go home now. So,
is there any promising research going on?
oh, there's very promising research. There's, right here in Oklahoma, there's 20 studies. Some of those studies are at the molecular level. There are things that are looking neuron by neuron for cures. There are new drugs out all the time. Most of those drugs never get to market because they just don't prove effective enough for the FDA to say, let's go with it. There's other research about nutrition, even as one struggling with Alzheimer's, can make a big difference, we think. There are, it's all over the place. I actually read a study, because I read quite a bit on Scientific American, Science Daily. I try to read. And there's an outfit in Germany that has gone in. Most of the research is with mice, of course. There's a special strain of mice that have developed, has been developed to mimic Alzheimer's disease in humans. And they went in and purposely worsened these mousers' Alzheimer's. Then they went in with a light therapy, not open up, through the skull light therapy that actually recovered some of those mice memories for them. Okay, who knows? Of course, there are lots of supplements out there that say whether it's ginkgo or whatever, and maybe yes, maybe no. But the research is all over the place. It's all, you may have read about magnetic resonance, where they strap this big old magnet on your head and zap your brain with some magnetism. Been some great strides there, but nothing definitive enough to come into common practice. There was somebody else? I've talked him into submission. Thank you so very much. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh no, thank you all.